Hello, fellas. The shoot.
Sorry.
We love to see it. So, if we don't go to shoot tomorrow, the whole thing's... So yeah, bye. Sorry.
The first film I worked on this term was called As Blue As You, which is a film about a Boy Scout called Derek coming across a Girl Scout called Hannah in the forest and trying to understand why she's alone. This is because she's being bullied by the rest of the girls in her Girl Scout group. I worked as art director on this film, so I made the costumes and gave the kids props and helped dress and scout for the location. I was also the only person in contact with the actors, so I spoke with their parents very regularly. When researching for my role, I watched a couple films that our director was inspired by when creating this film. These included Moonrise Kingdom by Wes Anderson and more recently Jojo Rabbit by Taika Waititi. To understand the Scout aesthetic our director had envisioned, I made a Pinterest board on different costumes, locations and general ideas of how to help fully fledge the characters of Derek and Hannah, which included little props such as a small telescope and a compass, and I had an in-depth look at different types of Scout badges and the meanings and the differences between US Scouting and UK Scouting associations, and overall how to make our own Scouting association as we didn't have permission from the UK Scouting Association. Through looking at all the Scouting memorabilia throughout the ages and other general researching those communities, I learned that Scouting associations are very badge-driven, so when making a costume for Derek and Hannah, I gave Derek a huge amount of badges compared to Hannah's character, who only had a couple, to show that she's newer to it and that there is a power imbalance towards Derek. Also during the research phase, I looked into designing their costumes. I knew from the get-go that I wanted them to look similar but different, so Derek's costume was tailored to be more light and airy with a white shirt and red collar. However, with Hannah's costume, I dyed her shirt blue to 1, match the film's title As Blue As You, and 2, to emphasise the fact that she's alone in the woods for a reason, because she's being bullied by the rest of the girls in her squadron and finds a friend in Derek. As I said earlier, my role in this film was art director, so my main role was to costume the actors Brian and Carrie Ann and find different props and locations that fitted with the director's vision. When initially looking into the actors, we had a brilliant casting call with some really talented child actors, but we settled for these two because Brian has quite shaggy hair and he is the perfect fit for who we were looking to play Derek. But also, comparing him to Carrie Ann, we wanted him to be smaller than her. So in the shot where she stands up, she's towering over Derek and takes him off guard, unbalancing the power between them. When casting Carrie Ann as Hannah, we had quite an open vision for who was cast. We knew we wanted someone with quite long hair so we'd be able to braid it, but that was really it. The reason we chose this is because she had quite a wide array of experience before and had played a main character in a short film as well, so we knew she would be good for the role. Overall, having the kids on set was a huge morale boost for everyone as they were absolutely brilliant actors and we really lucked out on how good they were. Also, their parents were both trained chaperones, so we were very lucky in that respect too. Their costumes fit them well and they looked really good in their surroundings. The only huge thing that didn't go very well was the weather. We tried to shoot on a day where we were going to have the most luck with the weather, however the forecast changed on the day from what was projected and that really did dampen the mood dramatically for the rest of the day. We sheltered the actors and parents as much as we could, but halfway through our shoot, the forecast for the next day changed dramatically to heavy storms, so at the end of the first day we had to call it quits and edit together what we could. If I were to go back and plan this shoot again, I would try to shoot in summer just so we would have the best luck with the weather, but also I would try to make sure the costumes were absolutely perfect. My director pointed out to me he wanted long sleeve polo shirts when planning, and I had a very hard time trying to find them, mainly because I don't think they exist. But if we were to shoot again, I would make sure I could find a good enough equivalent rather than short sleeves. When creating a narrative between the two characters, we aimed to have a lot of visual metaphors, such as Hannah's shirt and hair ties being blue like the title As Blue As You to represent that she is upset by something, but also for Derek's shirt to be white to represent his preserved innocence. I read a passage from Writing Subtext by Linda Serger and looked into body language. And when directing Carrie Ann, I put in a point to make her face towards Derek when she's talking to him, as this is subtext into inviting someone in to talk to you, is willing subconsciously to befriend Derek, but in her head is against it. In Linda's passage, she explained a friend of hers was looking to marry someone, but his body language was saying otherwise, which led Linda to telling her friend to look for someone else. I used this information and flipped it to show that she was secretly inviting Derek in to talk. For health and safety on this film, we were very careful with our actors, as we were filming in a forest so we knew it may be slippy, so we forewarned them, so they wore some sturdy shoes and bought rain jackets and bought umbrellas with them so they didn't get wet. We also had to make sure the lighting equipment and camera equipment didn't get wet, so we bought large plastic sheets with us so they didn't get wet and we could cover them when we weren't using them. This wasn't during shooting times, but when we were getting ready to go back home, I was holding a C-stand, however due to the wet conditions and my poor carrying skills, it slipped out my hand and swung around and the large bolt at the top hit me in the face, leaving me with a large bruise and a concussion. However, it was my own fault, and it was also out of shooting time, so I don't blame anyone on set, as it was my problem. If I could go back and make sure that didn't happen, I wouldn't have tried to carry that, as I know now that I am not able to do so. For my second film, I worked as art director again on a film called Skinny about a woman called Olivia who suffers with bulimia during the early stages of her pregnancy, which leads to a miscarriage. It follows the stages afterwards with her husband Jamie and how they deal with it. Researching for this film, I made a brief treatment for our director Macy about how I would dress the characters and the colour palettes I had in mind when reading the script, and she seemed to like it, so I was invited onto the film. When going about this film stylistically, I imagined it being set maybe in 2012 times, where the clothing or how I remember it is quite basic, so I had an idea for Olivia to be dressed in stripes because I remember that being a very specific style back in that time. Also, when thinking of the set, I wanted something a little colourful that could be easily dulled down for the more serious scenes, as I wanted there to be a difference in those scenes. As there is a before the miscarriage scene and an after, so the before scenes in the kitchen were quite dull, however in the after scenes at the end there's a pink fridge with fridge magnets and loads of colours to show the shift between Olivia and Jamie. I got criticised for this, however, as I put Olivia in front of the fridge as she's having her breakdown to Jamie because it was too garish. So if I could do that scene again, I would have them swap places and put him in front of the fridge and her on the other side, as it makes more sense, to be honest. Also, a huge part of my research was finding a recipe for fake blood that doesn't stain a wooden floor. So I conducted an experiment using multiple types of red dye, which were red food dye, red powder paint, red watercolour, red fondant dye, and red cake dye, which when testing I decided to use the red fondant dye, which worked and looked really well on camera and also didn't stain the wooden flooring. As I said, my role in the film was art director, so I had the job of making sure the set was right for each scene. A lot of the time we were filming, I had the task to black out windows, so I sprayed them down with water and stuck tinfoil to them to block out all the light when we shot a night scene, which worked really well because you can't tell it's daytime in these shots. The fake blood, as I've already mentioned, and also the fake vomit I had to make for the first scene also worked really well and looked really realistic, but also boosted the morale on set, which was really great. The only major issue we had while shooting on this film was our data handling. As the editor Tanner and the DOP Jacob went to swap the camera memory cards, they got them mixed up, meaning Jacob lost the new footage he had just shot, and Tanner was missing a whole scene, so they had to go back the next day with our female actress just to get the small scene where they needed the fake blood, so I made a small pot of it to go so they could use it and took a skeleton crew so I wasn't needed. If we were to shoot this film again, I would have taken into account the criticism we got for the final scene and film it the way that was suggested that I mentioned earlier, but also I'd perfect the fake vomit. Even though I was praised for it, I would just tweak it a tiny bit, even though I took into account the fact that Olivia hadn't eaten much recently, so it would be clearer, with little things like crisps. But I would also add something else with a tiny bit of colour, like chopped up bell pepper, just to make it a bit more visible on camera. Another part of this film that was eventually cut out because it was quite long was a small perfume advert at the beginning, which I made a perfume bottle and bought little props with me for. I had a great time making the logo for the perfume and studying other perfume bottles designs to get a feel for what I was going to create. It's a shame it was cut, but here's a small segment of it here as it was a great shoot and I feel like it could be easily implemented with a longer edit. The phrase show and then tell from On Filmmaking, an introduction to the craft of the director, slogans for screenwriters war, by Alexander McKendrick and Paul Cronin resonated with me when planning for Skinny because even though it's a book written for screenwriters and directors, it helped me plan costuming and general design for the house. As within the costuming, I wanted Olivia to not only wear stripes but vertical stripes, as subconsciously it makes a person look thinner. And I wanted it to be something that she may have thought about herself on how to make herself look skinnier. So there is an added layer of the character. I also throughout the film made her eat solely toast as a lightweight food, and even though bread is a carb, only toast is damaging to the body. And at the end of the film she's eating tomato soup with Jamie, which is to me a comfort food, so I wanted her to feel more at ease, as a lot of people associate soup with being a comfort food, which is inviting, so it makes the audience feel that she's more at ease with herself and her body dysmorphia. For health and safety on this film, I didn't have a lot to do when the set was live, but I made sure the boxes for the camera and the cables for the lights were safely tucked away in the hallway as we were shooting in a small area. And also during the scene where Olivia runs to the sink, I spotted Jacob, our DOP, when he was running backwards to make sure he didn't crash into the wall or trip over the close-by lighting stand. Another thing I did to ensure the health and safety was in check was to make sure when we were putting up the tinfoil on the high windows that I was spotting the ladder that our gaffer, Brandon, was on so he didn't fall off.